Everybody, welcome to Savvy Painter Podcast Live. I am here with Mary Tonkin, and I am so excited to do these live podcast events with you, and it's super, super exciting. I want to let you know that we are watching the comments, and if you have any questions for Mary, we'll be taking questions kind of towards the end. So the way that this will work is we'll just sort of do a live podcast event. We'll have a normal conversation, like you guys are kind of a normal, as if I could ever have a normal conversation, but we'll have a semi-normal conversation, and we get to hear about Mary and her journey as an artist. And then in, I don't know, about halfway through, I will be collecting. Brenna, my assistant, is in the background. She's collecting all the questions for me so I can see everything. I can see Facebook, I can see YouTube, I can see our Savvy Painter community who's watching us live. So this is super, super exciting. And welcome everybody. And welcome, Mary. Thank you so much for being on the Savvy Painter podcast with me and for joining me on this new venture here.
Thank you so much for asking, Andres.
Absolutely.
It's lovely. Yeah.
So let's, I would love to start off kind of just hearing about how you decided to make art your vocation.
Sort of almost fell into it. I didn't have any family models or anything. And I picked up a paintbrush in year 10. So I don't know whether it's fourth form for you, at about 16 in high school. And it just felt instinctive, as though I'd done it before. I felt like I knew what to do with it. And yeah, just fell in love with it, really. And I was doing a lot of science subjects and assuming I'd go on to do some kind of science at uni, but then just felt like I needed to do more visual arts. Did that, and then actually got into visual arts, so did that. Yeah, it was just an instinct. I just loved it and responded to it, and it was the thing I wanted to do.
Yeah.
What
you paint large scale landscape paintings on site. Yeah.
Yes.
How did you get into that genre?
Through undergrad at uni, I was painting portraits and still life things. So I did 4 years of a degree and an honours degree. And then I was doing some travelling, and I studied at the New York Studio School for a little bit, did a summer and semester there. And I was trying to stay sane and drawing a lot in Central Park. And it just felt wonderful to be outside, and it was my way of coping with being in New York. I'm a shy person from a farm in the middle of the bush, and the New York was quite difficult. Fabulous, but and overstimulating. But sitting in Central Park was just a bit of sanity.
Yeah.
And then when I came back, I was doing a master's degree, and I was painting portraits again. But I went to a trip to Central Australia, and I was working outside there, and it hit home that it was where I felt most alive and most responsive. And I think that's really important to work out where you are most, where you're most alive and responding to something, and clearly most excited about something. And being outside just seemed to make sense. So I started drawing outside for a long time before I worked out how to make sense of it in terms of painting. Yeah. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and just this idea of going from, somewhere really remote into New York City, I can completely relate to that. The overstimulation and just how drastically different it is, and kind of needing to be able to ground yourself in any space.
Yeah.
That kind of feels a little bit like Like, I
quieter.
don't know, home if home is it, but
There's no quiet there. There's no quiet or solitude. I didn't grow up in a particularly remote place. It's an hour out of Melbourne, which is a big city, but it's on a flower farm in the middle of bush, and we grew up with no power, no electricity, and just quite simply. And so, yeah, it was a big shock.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Can you for somebody, so I mean, I'm so fascinated and enamored with your paintings. Like every time I see one, I just want to be like, have my nose right up to it. And it's unfortunate that my views of your painting are on a computer screen. So I'm dying to be able to see them in person. But for somebody who hasn't seen your work, how would you describe it?
I usually just say it's figurative landscape painting that's not necessarily using the local colour, so drawing from the local colour. I'm painting in the bush, on site, present to the things, present to what I'm painting. I don't describe it very well, in truth.
It's a terrible question. It's really mean to ask somebody like, please tell me, how do you describe your work? That's like one of the hardest questions I think that you can ask an artist. It's like, it's a tough one. But it's like these, to me, it's just like this intimate portrait of the plant and flora. Like, just, it feels so it's landscape, but it just feels like so up close and personal and intimate, and the fact that it's so large scale just really allows you to get lost in it, I think, and allows you to really experience it as if you were in it. And I think that's, to me at least, where the scale of your work is so important.
Oh, that's good. That sounds like it's communicating what I want it to do, which is, and it's not always large scale, I should say, Antrice. It's sometimes large scale, sometimes not. So that varies. But it's really important to communicate that a very powerful connection I have with the places I'm painting and the sense of being present to it. So celebrating it in all its particularity. So, and being present wholly, so who I am now and what mood and emotional state and mental state and all of that stuff. I think you bring that stuff with you as an artist anyway, so there's no point denying it or ignoring it. And I try and just be present with whatever baggage that is going on. Sometimes it's not good, and just be present to the changes in the seasons and the growth, and because especially the big ones, the larger scale ones, I work over a long period of time, so things change, and there's a great deal of time embedded in them too.
Yeah, and so how large are the large scale ones?
The largest, silliest one is 180 centimetres by 18.9 metres, so roughly 6 by, what's that, roughly 6 by 20, what's 18 metres? No, that's not 20
18
foot,
meters is, no, a meter
yeah,
is...
it's nearly 19 metres, so that's like 60 feet, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something silly, yeah.
Yeah, a meter's like almost 3 feet, I think.
3 foot 3 inches, yeah.
I use my husband as my ruler. I know that he's 190
Yeah.
centimeters, and that means he's 6'4", but he's sort of like my measurement.
Nice. Yeah, so I tend to work kind of, just within a body scale, smaller things, or in a scale it's where I'm immersed in it. So it's, 6 by 6 or something a bit bigger. So that I love working like that, because you feel like you don't have that I'm working, I should say, in the bush, so I can't step back and see it while I'm working. I stand in front of the easel, and I can very rarely step back and see what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I'll step into what I'm painting or step on something, or there's growth all around me. So I'm immersed in the process of painting the thing. And so if it's a large scale particularly, there's something about letting go of the consciousness of making an image. You sort of just go into the process of it. So I suppose it's a meditative thing almost. There's some dangers, of course, because it means you lose the sense of how that mark relates to the whole, or not a consciousness of that. Does that make sense? So when you're on a little thing, you're aware of how that mark relates to the whole thing because you're seeing it all the time. But if you're on a larger piece, then you sort of drop that and you're aware of how that mark relates to your experience of seeing those things and that form in that space. And that's very important for me, that how forms relate to where I'm standing and how they are to each other in space. So it's just about a kind of breathing of the space and drawing it in. I suppose you're kind of, I don't know, not explaining it very well. You're moving out into the landscape and it's sort of you're being in it and it's being in you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That I mean,
And I think that's easier at that larger scale because you're not conscious of making art decisions. I certainly take them back to the studio and do a lot of thinking there and apply bits of collage to think about whether the colour's right and, do all sorts of tricks to work out what I'm doing in terms of painting and the composition. But when you're there, if it's those larger scale ones particularly, you really are just in the flow of it.
How do you, as a painter, I'm having such a hard time because your paintings are, to me, they are chaotic as nature is chaotic. There's chaos and order, and yet there's such a strong flow throughout them. So as a painter, I'm just trying to imagine how you can possibly do that in the middle of the bush on these paintings without, like I know you can step back a little bit, but if you're in that environment, you can't, get the long distance, like, as you were saying, like, how do you know what's going on in your paintings?
Well, I do a lot of drawings to start with. So I should say I wander around a lot to work out what the subject is going to be. So I'm working on my family's farm, the bush on the farm, which is roughly 60 acres of bush. So it's a fair area that I can wander around and might wander around for a couple of weeks and work out what I'm going to do, just doing little sketches or sometimes not drawing much, and then work at more detailed pencil drawing and work out what the composition is going to be. Often fairly detailed, though sometimes not. Sometimes I just rip into something and work it out. I don't know, Teresa, it just seems to work. Our bush is particularly messy too. I was struck when I was in the States how ordered the bush, your forests are. They're not bush, they're forests.
Yeah.
Certainly where I am, it's wet sclerophyll bush, wet eucalypt bush, and it's very dense and messy and glorious.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, if I had to guess, I would guess that you just must have the most amazing sort of visual memory for what's happening in the bush, in the forest, and that you just have so much reserves to draw from that you don't need to do the structure like I would, for example.
Well, I think I'm thinking of the structure a lot while I'm drawing, and then each time I take it back to the studio, I'm assessing it, and I change things around. I can change the whole format if I need to. Certainly on the smaller scale thing. So if I was working a larger painting, I tend to do a smaller scale study, and they're painted on primed but unstretched canvas. So I'm changing where the whole proportions of it and the edges the entire time. So working out, where compositionally where things are.
Yeah.
So that's usually quite settled before I get to a larger one.
Uh-huh. And how do you choose your motif when you're I have all these
Wandering
assumptions
around.
and all these imaginations of what you are doing. But yeah, I mean, I'm just so curious. Like, what is like when you are going to start a painting? Could you describe that? Like, what happens in your mind?
Uh, so I've, so it was variable. Sometimes I have a clear idea of I want to paint a quite singular form, but that's rarer. Generally, I just wander around and something strikes me as being more interesting. So it engages more deeply for some reason, and I think that's quite often instinctive. And I just let that be. I don't sort of question it too much because I think that if you can bring sort of almost too much consciousness to it and make it too self-conscious. So I like to just draw and let it be, and if something's bugging me, or I'm going back to something, or it's just exciting, and I think that's it. That's what I want to paint, and then I'll make drawings, sometimes a little study, and quite often, maybe a third of them I'll chuck away because I'll be painting it, and then it's just I've lost interest. So there's something I've thought was interesting, and it might have just been a shift of light or a relationship of forms, and it doesn't hold enough interest as I'm working on it. So unless it's engaging, I think it's some kind of subconscious level or something that I want, some content that I want to convey. So something about how I'm feeling or how I'm relating to those forms or the world at the time. I suppose I'm finding a subject that's a vehicle for that, and some things you think might be but just aren't. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Do you so I'm curious about what you said about the intuition versus what's happening in your head, like overthinking it. I think that's a very common practice, a common thing for artists to struggle with
Yeah.
is allowing that inner voice to have its say and to speak up and to not let your analytical side destroy it or to think too, to overthink
Yes.
things.
Yeah, that's easy. And your
Yeah.
anxieties and yeah.
Yeah.
So doing a recent large project I'd been wanting to do for a long time, and you've just at some stage got to stop yourself worrying about something and just launch into it if it's something you need to do.
Yeah.
But probably more particularly, I think we give precedence in our culture to intellectual thoughts or sort of cool thinking. We don't think enough or allow enough precedence for the intelligence in our body, our somatic intelligence. So I think that if you're just allowing yourself to be in a moment, your body and your subconscious can tell you things that you just need to. I think it's quite difficult for us culturally to just listen to. And I think drawing certainly is a way into that for me.
Yeah. Has it always been that way for you?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Yes, I think the first drawing I remember making was in response to some bushfires we had here when I was maybe 10. Would have been 10. Just a drawing of a little watercolour, I think, before and after the fires. So just processing, really, dealing with what had happened to the bush. And yeah, no one told me to do it. I just found some way of making sense of it. So I would say. Yeah.
You mentioned, when I invited you to come onto the podcast and talk with me, you mentioned that you'd just come out of quarantine, and so you were excited to get back out into the bush. And I'm really curious what how, I mean, this, it's like I have to remember that those massive starry fires in Australia happened in 2020. Like that was also part of 2020. That it wasn't just COVID.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like an all-encompassing question of with those fires and with COVID and not, I'm assuming, not being able to go out to the places that you had normally been able to go to. How did you cope with that? Like, what did you do?
Well, the fires weren't an issue for us here. They were more along the eastern coast, so from Sydney right down to East Gippsland, so north, far east from us, not in my area. So you watch it and get worried about it, but it wasn't affecting us physically
directly.
But COVID, yeah, with the lockdowns, we're pretty intense lockdowns here in Melbourne, and homeschooling, so that was interesting. So I would just get the kids to do their work in the morning and then drag them to the bush in the afternoon. So I did get some work done, not lots, and not in a concentrated fashion with kids with me, but I've got 10-year-old twins, and they're wonderful, curious kids, so they would just be bird watching, and we've got lyrebirds in the bush, and they're watching them a lot, and sitting reading or climbing trees and romping around. So kind of ideal for them to manage their stress, and for me to get a couple of hours to not go insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a tricky year.
Yeah.
And the last lockdown was just a brief five-day thing because we had another outbreak from quarantine. But we've been very lucky in Melbourne and managed it pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah. Australia's managed to do very well with that. Well,
yeah.
I don't know if anyone can say very well with it, but better than a lot of places.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess with regards to the fires that are not in Australia, I was just wondering if that just the scale of that, what was happening, impacted your thoughts about your own work.
Probably not hugely. You just get a renewed, it reinforces the sense of fragility of the environment and I'm very concerned environmentally about what we've done to the world, and it really reinforces all of that, just what a terrible state the world's in. Mm-hmm. That's sort of heartbreaking. So I suppose in that sense it's affecting my work because I feel like there's a renewed sense of urgency to record what we have.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's going to be available for my kids or their kids. So there's a deeper intensity about recording that and living it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Your work, trying to think, like, I kind of like what's coming into my mind. So my instinct is, you take a lot of chances, it seems like, with your color. Like your colors are just amazing. Like that's my, like, I have no, like, they're awe-inspiring. They're beyond words. I'm having a hard time coming up with words. But the color palette that you use and the choices that you make with color, can you talk a little bit about that process for you? Like what do you kind of start with a palette in mind and work your way out from there, or how are you deciding on your color choices? Because they're accurate, but they're not, like, I'm not sure, like, they're not, like, unless like the bush in Australia is not at all what I expect it to be.
It's not local color, Andres.
It's not local color. It's not like the color of the actual
no. Well, sometimes
foliage that we're
rarely.
seeing, but
yeah, I think it's actually difficult to make forms sit in space with the local colour, just the local colour alone. But not only that, it doesn't convey enough for me the experience of being there, or the whole sensual envelope that you have when you're in a place. So it doesn't convey anything of your sense of what it's like to be in that place and stand before those forms, the smells and the sounds. And I don't see why painting couldn't or shouldn't be loaded with those sensations. So you want colour to be a poetic or metaphoric vehicle for all of that experience. So I think that's what I'm aiming for. Whether I do it is another matter. And how I make those choices is variable. So sometimes I'll have a sense that I want to make a certain coloured painting or have a certain kind of tonal range. But mostly when I'm drawing, that process implies what that palette might be. And that's to do with what content or feeling I think I'm trying to generate. And sometimes it can be, I can't control it. I went through a period of sort of grief around infertility, which obviously got resolved. But through that period, about a year, I was just making quite dark paintings and trying really hard not to, but they ended up being quite grey or restrained black palettes. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't make a painting work that didn't have that palette, so I just had to do it. And so it's just, I think, just quite instinctive responses are driving those colour choices. Yeah, I worry about it, whether I'm being... you said I was being quite interesting in the colour. I wonder whether I am sometimes, or whether I'm just repeating myself. So, yeah, I question it a lot.
You do? I saw you posted something the other day on Instagram about, part of your process and using collage and using paper as a way to, when you come back to your studio, to sort of do some color tests and see how that felt within the painting. Can you talk a little bit about that process and how it affects your color decisions?
Yeah, sure. I was thinking it's a bit like, what Bonnard said about Cézanne. Bonnard said he didn't feel strong enough to paint outside because he was overwhelmed by I think he meant the local colour or the way things are. And he thought Cézanne was very strong because he could just paint the way things were or that kind of thing. And it's a bit of wanting the bit of both worlds. So you're there and you're responding. But when I take it back to the studio, I want to be able to think about what colours might be appropriate to how that felt and what it needs compositionally as well. So I've got a heap of collage paper that I might rip bits off that are just different colour choice. And sometimes you just don't have, I think what Bono was on about too, is sometimes you don't have the imagination to think about what that colour could be when you're overwhelmed by the presence of that green thing, Yeah. So if you've got at the moment I'm making a painting about 6 by 7 foot of bracken. So it's grown really beautifully in the wet summer and it's over my head. And there's a form in the front that I was thinking about. It's greenish, bluish green, and it's catching the light. And throughout the rest of the painting, they're blues and teals. And I'm thinking that probably needs to be a lemony or some other colour because I want it to come forward. But also it's here. When I'm painting it, it's a foot away from me. So it's right up in my space, and I need to convey that feeling that it's almost melting into my field of vision or melting into my body. And so, you have all that sensation and understanding out there, but when you come back to the studio, you think, oh, what could I use? And I'm not very good at imagining out there maybe, or it's easier sometimes to have that distance to think, oh, well, maybe that colour would work. So I'd rip it up and stick it on the wet paint and take it out, and then sometimes quite often that doesn't actually hold up and be a decision, but it's sort of jogged my process or jogged a way of thinking about different colours. Yeah, it's useful to have that distance.
Yeah. And when you're working on these paintings, I'm laughing at myself because the question I want to ask is, how long does it take you? And it's always so funny when people, how long does it take you to do that painting? But I think the reason I'm so curious about that is just this process of being out in the bush, coming back into the studio, making decisions about the painting, and then going back out there while there is nature happening, like decay and animals passing through, and nothing is I can't imagine anything is the same when you get back the next day. So I'm trying to wrap my head around that, and I'm kind of just wow, that's such an amazing challenge.
It's interesting at times. You should hear me scream sometimes. Sometimes if there's been a deer or wallabies through the bush and chewed something I've been painting, that can be problematic. Mostly I think this, because it's private land, I can leave my easel and paints out there, and I think the smell of the oil paint keeps most things away.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So it tends to be not too many changes. So sometimes you have, just a tree fall through things. But so a 6 by 7 foot painting that I'm working on will probably be 6 weeks. So just going back each day and different weathers, and not rain, but different light and over the course of the day.
Yeah. So when there's those types of changes, do you just incorporate it, or do you wait for it to go, like weather? How do you incorporate that?
Yeah, over the process of that painting, it tends to just settle down which parts of the painting use which light. So it amalgamates the light across the day. I'm not Monet with the kids bringing out the paintings for different times of day. It's just so the most recent one I've sort of finished. The right panel is the same size, is a morning light, and the other side's an afternoon light. But there's variable bits within that. So you work out over time how to amalgamate those bits of light and weather changes. And so some bits might be when it's very sunny or when it's overcast, and just use that kind of part of the experience to mesh into the painting. It becomes an amalgam of experience over time, essentially.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense, Andres.
No, I like that. It makes
it takes a long time, because obviously the light's changing, the weather's changing, I'm making decisions that are changing, how I'm feeling is changing. So I'm not fast.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just imagining, even if I wanted to leave my palette out in my backyard, my dogs would eat it. So they would not be. They wouldn't be deterred by the smell of oil paints. They'd probably just go, yum.
Yeah, it's a box. It's a box, because the rats eat it too. The native rats chew the paint, sadly. So I have to make sure it's sealed and away from them.
How do you what is your setup like when you're out there?
So I've made a aluminium easel, which is highly adjustable. So I made it particularly for a site where I wanted to stand on a log, which was 4 foot off the ground, so it can go over something like that, or it's quite large and adjustable. And then I have just an old baby change table at the moment that is the resting spot for the palette, and a plastic tub of paints and mediums. Just leave all that out and take the paint bag with the brushes and stuff back to the studio and the paintings.
And then for the I'm imagining then for the canvases themselves, do you paint on canvas, or you said you paint on some of your stuff?
Linen, stretched linen, yeah. Well, the larger ones are stretched linen, and the others are unstretched on a board or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you have guidelines, and like, how do you keep that from sailing away?
No, don't tend to, because it's quite sheltered bush. So it's the bush here that I'm working in is a very high canopy bush and very dense, wet, and very rarely too windy. So quite often I'll have to, if it's windy, I can. I've got little clamp things that I clamp it to the easel. But it's not like the first spot I worked at Werribee Gorge, west of Melbourne, where it was very windy and you'd have to guy rope things down to stop the easel and the painting's blowing over.
Yeah.
But here, I don't have that problem. Happily, don't have that problem. It's
because you're in like almost
the easiest place in the world, I'm sure, to work. I don't have I have snakes to worry about, but there's no animals that are going to kill me or people that are going to kill me. It's just safe and lovely.
All you have to worry about is the snakes.
Yeah, and very rarely.
I love it. What do you I feel like I'm just like I'll stop with the questions about like what's the paint setup and how do you do this and how do you do this?
No, that's all right. Ask what's interesting.
I think for artists it is really interesting, and one of the questions I get a lot from artists is artists who are working at it's interesting. It doesn't matter what the scale is, but they always say like, I want to work bigger, right? So bigger is all relative to where you are now, right? Because I've seen people who've
Yeah.
said that, like, oh, I want to work bigger. And I ask them what that means. And they're like, yeah, like, 12 by, like this size. I'm like, oh, okay. But your scale to me is bigger. So I'm like, wow, that's just,
Well,
that's on a
I think you need
whole
to think
other
about,
level.
yeah, and you need to ask yourself why, like, what's the point? Because I don't think work necessarily needs to be bigger. For me, it's useful because it allows me access, as I was saying, to, I think the content of it, just having that larger scale allows me to respond in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of people don't necessarily, why make, I think they should be asking why make it bigger, or is there any point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's the reason for doing that? What does it give to the painting itself?
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned Bonnard and you mentioned Monet also, but I'm kind of curious, like, who are the artists that you look at when you want to be inspired?
I love Bonnard. Bonnard, Cézanne, Matisse, Morandi, and a whole lot of, there's so much great contemporary painting going on.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's plenty of it. Yeah.
Are you I find that some artists, when they get stuck, it's really helpful to look at other artists, and for others, it's the opposite. That looking at other artists makes them go kind of deeper inside. So I'm curious, like, for you, when you get stuck, or do you get stuck? If you do, what is it that where do you go to for inspiration?
Depends what you're getting stuck with. Yeah, so what do you mean stuck with what? Don't know that I get stuck. I just, if I'm worried about whether I'm being boring with things, I'll look at other artists. Yeah. Stuck in what sense, I think I need to ask Entries.
A very open-ended question, almost on purpose, just to see what you know. Well, I think the common areas that artists get stuck is, let's see. Some artists get stuck with, like, I don't know what to paint today. Like, or even if you have a series, it's like, okay, I know I'm gonna do this, but I don't have a solid idea yet of what this in this context means, if that is not horribly vague. So yeah. There's the kind of what to paint, and then there's the how to paint it, and then the third. These are like big buckets and very simplifying everything drastically, but and then the other one is am I being derivative of myself? Like, am I doing the same thing over and over again?
Yeah, that's the one I would worry about, whether I'm being derivative of myself. So then I would look at what's going on with contemporary artists, but also just the artists I love so much. Just look at the bookshelf. But generally speaking, if I'm not sure what I'm doing, I draw. Just draw and find where I am, just wander and draw, or try a different medium, try some watercolor or some collage, or just I've been doing some clay drawings.
Some clay drawings. What do you mean?
Clay drawings. So just making, I suppose, what you call shallow relief sculptures, but I call them drawings. They're just using paper clay to draw outside. So they're just like a new drawing medium. Yeah. And so, yes, just draw and figure out what I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So simple.
Well, sure. But drawing is so fundamental and, as you say, simple, but it allows you access to yourself and how you're responding to the world and what you're interested in. So it's I would just say draw. And I would say that for anyone starting, just draw for years until you know what it is you want to do and say. And you can find who you are. When I was teaching drawing, it's amazing how it allows students access to their deeper selves and who they are and how they are in the world, how they be in the world, and how they take information in and make sense of it.
Yeah.
Just draw.
I mean, to me, it's like it forces you to slow down and really look.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that especially now, like the slowing down your brain, slowing down your thoughts, and just being present with how exactly is that leaf curling over, and that's the only thing that you're concerned about,
Yeah.
and getting
Yeah.
that deep into it.
Yeah. And things like how do I see that form, or how do I construct that form? What are my interests in terms of that? Am I like interested in shape or the tone of it, or like for me, intimacy is a huge precursor. I need things to be close, and a lot of people need things to be at a distance, and so that all has meaning, and you can sort all that out through drawing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. I think we're
And
really. What's that?
no, go. Oh, it might be just draw.
Oops, we lost you for a second.
Through your mind.
We've got a little Zoom glitch, Mary. Oh,
Yeah,
there we
my
go.
phone rang. So yeah,
That was
it's all right. My phone rang. So because I'm hotspotting off the phone, it cuts out when it rings.
Oh, got it. Okay. So I'm sorry. So I missed that last part.
That you might be drawing from your mind, so you might not be necessarily engaging with how the world looks, but or is, but just how you relate to it in terms of, drawings out of your imagination.
Mm-hmm.
Equally as relevant to sorting out where you're going.
Yeah, I can totally see that. What strikes me about that is just how how fortunate and unfortunate we are as artists that that we get to really go, like that act, whether it's drawing or painting, of slowing down and becoming lost in, a fingernail or the edge of a leaf or something, like that small and that intimate, and really seeing it. I don't think anyone else does that. I might be biased, but I really don't think, I think it's really artists who take the time to really notice that, and to look at nature, and to look at other people, if it's portraits, to look at somebody that closely. I don't think we ever really get to do that, and it is an act of intimacy, like you're saying.
Yeah, and paying attention. Yeah. It's a sort of meditative attention that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think scientists do it. Natural history scientists probably do it, just in terms of when they're studying something, pay a lot of attention and be in a place and record things.
Mm-hmm.
And just it's a lot about curiosity too, isn't it? Just being somewhere, or because there's no point drawing the leaf if you're not engaging with it curiously. So it's about giving your attention in a curious, wholehearted fashion. It's not just drawing that thing. It's drawing it, as you say, with attention, and curiosity, I think, is important too.
Yeah, very much so. I think curiosity in the sense of just being that slowness, that sort of really being deliberate and slow with the decisions that you make on the canvas or on the paper, and that the curiosity of not coming at it with the idea that you already know the answer. You know that
Absolutely, yeah.
you've seen the
Yeah.
leaf, you've seen a leaf, so you know what that leaf looks like. You know,
Mm, mm,
which I think can destroy a painting if you think you already know the answer before you start.
completely, yeah. You're just,
Yeah.
well, you're making an illustration, you're not necessarily making a painting.
Do you see, you know, for yourself, do you find that there's a distinction in in the approach of curiosity? Like, I'm wondering if there's for you, when you think of going into a painting with curiosity, um, I want to ask you what you mean that by that, because for that very reason that we just talked about, because I was just thinking right now, like, oh yeah, I know what she's talking about, and then I was like, do I? Because I'm coming at it thinking I know it, you know, what it means to be curious about an image or about a painting, but I don't know what you mean, Mary, when you get really curious about.
I think I was talking about what your analogy of drawing a leaf and looking at the edge of a leaf, that if you're going to do that, unless you're approaching it curiously, then there's no, well, it's not that there's no point, but it has more meaning if there's curiosity involved, so that you're not just drawing your idea of that leaf, but you're drawing your questioning of how it comes into being for you. So how is it that that leaf is there? How is it that that extraordinary little edge sits in space like that? You know, bring that kind of attentional attitude to it. And yes, I suppose that's what I'm doing in my work, that I'm trying to pay attention and understand the presence of all the individual forms as part of the, you know, the whole image, which is an act of curiosity and reverence, almost a kind of, it's an homage or act of love, actually, to spend that time and paint those things. And I do love them. I love being there. So it's, you know, it's just part of it, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's part of that curiosity. I think is just part of that being present. I don't think you're present unless you're curious.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm just thinking, you know, for a lot of people who might, you know, love the forest or love the bush, would go hiking through it and pass
Yeah,
through and never see what you see.
yeah. They don't spend a time in a place. If you just go, if you're going back and back, then you're learning it in a different way. You're layering it, and you're seeing the changes in the fungi and the bugs and the birds, and really knowing it deeply.
Yeah.
And of course, in the same way, you know where you're at deeply. You have there's that intimacy, you know, goes back and forth.
From the time that you've spent in those environments, what have you learned through your curiosity? Like how have you changed by spending that much time in looking at those places?
I'm learning a lot, even more recently. I'm getting much more curious about knowing the botanical names of things, or I'm trying to make a biodiversity study of the bush, so understanding all the bugs and the beetle, you know, the fungi and the plants. The birds I've mostly known since I was a kid, because I was a pretty keen bird watcher when I was a kid. But still learning more about which bird is making what call. The honeyeaters particularly, it's taken me till this year to sort out some of them because I haven't been able to see them. And I've just worked in a couple of spots where they've been feeding in trees right near me, so I could tell which was which and start to separate them. And just telling the difference in the different species of ferns and things that I hadn't, you know, there's lots of ferns on the ground and big enormous tree ferns. And you can just tell, if you're paying attention, and you can see the different shapes of them but you need to turn them over and look at the spore patterns and things to tell what species they are. So just trying to learn about all that a bit more, because hopelessly. Well, my family were typical of most Australians, just, well, maybe not. My dad's was a horticulturalist, so my family are, and very interested in exotic species, so things that are rare plants from all around the world, particularly bulbs, but completely incurious about the Australian native flora and the flora. Just thought it was all boring rubbish. And so we didn't grow up with he was an intensely curious person, but didn't imbue in us any desire to know more or name more what the native species were. And I've only sort of recently been trying to educate myself because I'm woefully ignorant of what a lot of them are. So that's been lovely, really lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just always, I think, they've done so many studies on, I think now now it seems like we're really seeing it with everybody being indoors so much more than they normally were. But the effect and the impact on the human mind from being outdoors versus being indoors, and how much well, in the most simplistic sense, how much happier we are when we're outside and when we're in nature, and how it triggers different parts of your brain, like the curiosity, creative thinking, all of those things that we tend to want so much, and we lose by being stuck indoors, especially, people, I'm thinking of New York, but people in large cities who don't get to see greenery too much. So I guess, I was like, wow, like you study it so intensely. And I'm just wondering if you felt any impact from that.
Probably. I'd notice it more when I've lived in cities, how much I miss it. And certainly I just feel like I know that I need it. And I think you can, it's hard to know whether I'm just imposing my judgment because of my experience, but I think when I go to big cities or just go to Melbourne, you can see the difference in the way people interact. So we live here in an outer urban, very beautiful green neighbourhood which is surrounded by national park, really. There's a lot of national park around us, very tall forest. And the people and they're gardeners essentially because they're larger blocks. But there's a friendliness and an openness that I think is part of that experience of just being more relaxed and alive and curious, as you say. And in Melbourne, Melbourne's a friendly city, I'm not saying that, but people don't make eye contact as you walk down the street, and that kind of very basic social interactions that I find quite difficult.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. So I think, yes, at a very fundamental level, humans need that green interaction, and it really deeply affects who they are to their core, but I think we ignore that in our culture. And I think a lot of people function in cities or towns without enough interaction with their natural environment.
Yeah, that's true. I'm curious if you have, I'd love to ask this question because sometimes it just brings up really interesting stories. But like, what would you like, when people see your work, what would you like them to experience?
Probably something akin to what I'm experiencing. So a sense of immersion, presence to the forms, kind of particularity of those forms, and something of a sensual, metaphoric understanding of them. Something sort of poetic, something poetic coming from it. I want them to have the paintings to have a presence that really pushes out and envelops people. Yeah.
Have you what is like have there been like sort of reactions to your work? Have you seen people like looking at your work, experiencing something and that you didn't expect?
Yes, there's some people are just uh, see it as painting and landscape and walk on, and um, I understand that. It annoys me, but I understand that.
They don't know what they're talking about.
And that's I'm thinking of one particular person who is a curator, contemporary art curator, who just they put it in a box and think it's landscape, and I'm not even going to. She wasn't even looking at it actually. So there's a spectrum, and other people that are very moved by it, which is terrific if people are responding and being moved by being hopefully feeling that they're in the presence of. I was going to say in the presence of bush, but you can't really put them in the presence of bush. You're putting them in the presence of something that is an experience of being there. So, yeah, yes, people have been moved by it, which is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always nice when you get to experience that, when you get to see people experience your work and have either a similar have the response that you intended or something similar. And sometimes the experience is completely unexpected and in hopefully in a good way.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I want to ask you this question. I haven't been asking this question lately, but it was one of my favorite questions. So, and it's also one of the questions that people go. But if you could own a piece of art by any living artist, what would it be or whose?
Living artist. Clara Shush. It's my dog. I would love a painting by Vincent Hawkins, who's a British painter, abstract or Clara, come on. Not particularly representational painters. Some things are. So there's some things that have some kind of basis in a form that you would recognise, but essentially just really beautiful, evocative abstract paintings. Have a look. Look him up.
Yeah, I will.
Really tremendous. And he plays with a lot of different things. Sometimes just bits of watercoloured paper cut into shapes, and there's something about his work that really touches me that I find very moving. So I would love one of his. Yeah. Oh, there's so many though.
I know it's hard, and so that's why it's another reason why I try to kind of constrain it to like a living artist, and also just so we can all know more living artists and support more living artists.
Yes, yeah.
I'm also curious, like for you, what is something that from the outside looks like you do very easily, but took you a long time to learn?
Yeah, probably working out how to use colour. So all through undergrad, I was painting quite local colour, right up to honours, and then when I went to New York, that introduced me to that New York studio school painting, introduced me to a way of thinking about colour and structuring colour. Essentially, it was just good painting education that I hadn't had. And then I just had to move past that, in a sense, and find out what I wanted to do with it. And so, and particularly in the landscape, I was working with very limited palette for a couple of years, or at least a year, probably 2 years, just to work out all that stuff you were talking about, how you structure something, or just working out how to make a painting outside, how to be outside and make a painting. I would take out pre-mixed palette of very limited palette of 5 colours or something to start with.
So when you say five, I was going to ask you that. When you say a very limited palette, what is that? What colors did you take? 5?
Yeah, about that. Maybe 5 in black and white. I think the first ones were raw umber, maybe a burnt sienna, a yellow, and a white and a black. Just really simple colours. Now I use quite full palette, and they become quite limited colour range, but that's just because I'm making a painting, and that's just the colours that's required. But it took me a long time to work out how to use colour in the landscape and make a painting.
It's hard.
Yeah, and to make colour feel like it was responding to how I'm feeling. Yeah, I feel like I still struggle with that. So yeah, probably, but I don't know what looks easy to other people.
True.
Yeah.
No, I think that, like sometimes, there's something that we just get really excited about, and can spend decades figuring out and learning and just obsessing over. I think as artists, we do that easily. And I think that's what makes us like special in the best possible way. That curiosity and just willingness to be like, yeah, I'm gonna just nerd out on this for as long as it takes.
Sure.
Yeah,
something you have to know.
Yeah, and you want. I think it's the pursuit of mastery, and I think that's what sets apart a lot of artists, is just this. It's like a dog with a bone, really. It's like just as unwilling to let go, of this idea, or this like desire. It's an idea and a desire to really know something, and color is such a I mean, you add one more pigment into your paint box, and the varieties you get are infinite. And so learning how to handle that, control that, and make it say what you want to say is, that's decades.
Tricky. Yeah.
Easily. Yeah.
It really is. Yeah, my teacher, I had a fantastic teacher, Jeff Dupre, in undergrad, and just a great friend, and he always said that it takes 10 years at least from when you start painting to get a sense of how to use it, how to paint. At least 10 years, I think that's true.
Yeah. 10 years if you're painting, a lot.
All the time.
Yeah.
Hobby painter, maybe 50. Yeah. It needs to be intense and daily.
Yeah. What is your daily habit like, or do you have one?
It's changed with kids. So getting them to school, and then I get to work, and I work all day, and then stop and pick them up. And as long as it's not raining, I'm working. And if it's raining, then I might be doing some things in the studio, or sometimes some ceramics, dealing with the housework. Boring crap. And sometimes of a weekend, if it's been wet during the week, I can steal some time and do some work of a weekend. But generally it's school hours, not enough.
Yeah. What do you think? So I'll ask 2 more questions, and then we'll jump into the questions from the audience. So my question would be like, what habit do you have that you think serves your painting the most? What habit or character trait that might be a better?
I've decided I'm quite good at compartmentalizing things. So I'm quite good at just shutting the cupboard and leaving the mess, or just not dealing with other stuff other than the work I'm doing. I'm quite obsessive, I suppose, so I can just do what I need to do and ignore that thing that most normal people would deal with. So, in recent times, I've just tidied my studio. It took me a week because it's been a few years, and just, deeply cleaned it. So I think I'm good at just leaving something that doesn't actually need to be done and just getting on with the work. So I think some people spend a lot of time just cleaning and procrastinating and messing about, but because I have such a limited time, I work and I think I'm quite good at that. I've decided. Yeah.
How like, what's a good painting day for you? How, like, if you get X number of hours painting, what's a good day for you?
Well, I used to work from dawn till dusk for the kids. I had long days, but now that I'm at work at shortly after 9, and have to leave at 3ish, just after 3, to pick them up. So it's really too short.
Yeah.
It would be better, a 10-hour day. That'd be great. But,
Easily.
Yeah. Yeah. Easily. Choices we make. Yeah.
I'm gonna take so questions from the audience are very much about setup and how. So Donna's asking what is the setup on the site? So you described the easel that you made yourself to solve a specific problem of getting over a log, right?
Yeah.
But is that your go-to? Can you describe that for people so they can kind of get a visual almost of it?
Yeah, sure. So it's just, I think it's called it's like a square aluminium stuff that I just bought from a big hardware store, and made a frame that's maybe 9 feet high, about 4 foot wide, 3 or 4 foot wide, and then another bit of angle line that's the bit where the painting sits. And that's
so like I don't want to say
an A-frame easel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's adjustable, and its legs. I've got attachments for the legs, so it can be adjusted if it's uneven ground. And it's just a fully adjustable, homemade dodgy easel. And
And then how do you what's your palette like? Are you plastic, glass, wood person, or none of the above?
It's like a wooden box that so that it can shut and keep the rats out. It's a large, again, a homemade. Just how big is it? Probably in total a meter's space. So
oh wow.
So it folds up and then opens out, and you've got.
Is that like what are they called? Like is it a French? I think they called it a French mistress. I'm not sure why, but it's like a box.
Ooh. Could be, but this is just a homemade. Yeah, it's just a homemade box, Antrice. It's just just bits of 2B, not 2B1, just bits of pine that are on a bit of board, and
it's a box.
It's a box, and just
it can be a box,
oiled. Yeah. And a plastic box to put the paints in so the rats don't eat it. And yeah, it's pretty simple. And the advantage is that I'm not carrying that back and forth. When I was working at Werribee Gorge in public space, then you're schlepping it all back and forth, and that's hard work.
Yeah, it's heavy too. Yeah. It gets heavy very fast.
Yeah, it's hard enough to get the paintings in and out, let alone the materials.
Yeah. And let's see, Meg was asking, do you generally know the scale before you start, or do they grow organically?
I know this. I have to say I know the scale to start with, roughly. So if I'm working on a small thing, I'm working on unstretched canvas, generally, sometimes stretched, but mostly unstretched, tacked to a board, and I work out where the edges are. So that's organic. The larger ones, I tend to know what the scale is beforehand.
Because you've done those smaller studies?
Yes, or just launch into it. And I have adjusted larger scale ones by adding another panel or peeling the edge back and putting a bit more wood in or something. So that can be quite organic too.
And I think you just asked this. Sean was asking if your paintings are stretched on canvas, and that's kind of variable, right?
Yeah.
And you paint in sections. Somebody's asking, Janet was asking if you paint in sections, but it sounds like that's like as the painting needs it, you're adding things in and taking them out.
Yes. So I think she means by sections whether you're working on one part, then not across. I work across the whole, probably, I assume. So if I'm working on a 2-panel thing like I am at the moment, it's a good example. It's a 6 by 7 foot hole, but 6 by 3.5 2 panels. And I would start with one in the morning, take the other one out generally around midday and bolt them together and work across it, or just swap it over and have one. So sometimes I've got the whole thing, which is not necessarily useful because I can't see it, but I am working across the whole. I'm not like Spencer or something where you're working, or Freud where they work in a little area then work out. I do draw it in with paint and block it in and work it. I am conscious of the whole thing right from the start.
Oh, interesting.
So some artists have that amazing capacity to just start somewhere and grow out across the surface. That boggles my mind. I don't like. Yeah.
I've watched people paint like that and I am amazed. I'm in awe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've seen people start with like, either if you're doing a portrait, then, a lot of people talk about, you just start with the eye and then you once you get that correct, then you just measure everything against the eye. But I've also seen people do that with, starting with a little tree way off in the distance and they're doing this massive landscape and my head explodes.
Yeah, me too. Because how do you know where that is in relation to you or that form or, just...
Yeah.
I don't understand. Yeah.
Yeah. But that to me is like what's so interesting is that we all have like these ways of thinking about a painting and how we construct it. And I think like, at least for some of those people that paint that way that I've talked to, they're just like, yeah, well, I couldn't paint the way you do, I'm like, well, yeah, I guess not.
Yeah, I wonder if those people see differently or whether they have different wiring about how they take in visual information, actually.
I think so. I would imagine so because we, I often wonder what, how, there's certain foundational skills that we learn, whether it's in art school or through workshops. And I wonder how much of that has to do with the way that we end up painting. Like I've talked to like, this is another one that just completely blows my mind. And I've tried to do it and I last like about 30 seconds. But like there's some artists who will mix all their paints ahead of time. So they know all the colors, they've got them all mixed and prepped and everything. And then they start painting. And for them, it's kind of like, okay, you do the hard, their concept is, I do the hard work first. I mix all the colors. And once those are all mixed, then I'm free to like make other decisions and free to paint as I go along. And my that's another one that my head just explodes. Like I cannot wrap my head around it.
Yeah. I sort of understand that because I started like that when I was first painting with a very limited palette. I'd mix it up and take it out. It would save time as well. But yeah, I can't. After a time, it becomes restrictive. You can't respond and get a particular colour or a particular combination enough. Yeah, I would find that difficult. Yes.
Yeah,
but I suspect those people are making a kind of magic within that parameter. We're all setting up parameters for ourselves and little ways of working or fields in which we work, and they're just working within that.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I'm really fascinated too with this misconception that if you know any artists, you kind of know most of the time this is not true, that artists are kind of flighty, unorganized, and like that there's so many options, and there are, but the way that the artists, I think, manage that is through like massive amounts of constraint, such as I'm going to use these 5 pigments, or I'm going to
Yes.
use this size, or I'm going to use this, like there's something that we do that sort of is the constraint that focuses us so that we can get the work done, because otherwise there's so many variables.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Just choice of medium to start with.
Yeah.
You could. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There's so much to play with.
Yes. It's such fun.
It is.
Yeah. So you just obsessively go down one little narrow thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You follow that tunnel until there's nowhere else to go, and then you've like,
Yeah.
or you like exhausted your own. I keep using the word obsession, but it works. You've exhausted your own obsession with that idea, and then you go off. You go down another little rabbit hole, which is the fun part. Do we have Brenna? I think we've gotten all the questions. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Just want to make sure that I didn't miss any. So last question for you, Mary. What have we not talked about that you would like people to know? What have I not asked you that you think would be good for people to know?
Share. Yeah, I can't think of anything, Andres. No, I can't think of anything else.
We've asked you
Quite a bit.
quite a bit.
Yeah. It is tricky though, isn't it, having a conversation about painting without being in front of it, or for you to have a chance to see it, even just
Yeah.
tricky. Yeah.
It is. I think the trickiest part is that, I mean, it's the double-edged sword, right? We have this other language that we speak, the visual language, and then this is sort of forcing it into the verbal language, into words. And if there were words for everything, then I don't know if we would need to paint. I don't know.
No.
I think it's its own language.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's hard to verbalize. I always feel like I do such a poor job of it, really. You can't really get at what you mean with words.
No. But you did wonderful. And I really appreciate the time that you spent with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Andres.
Especially since I know how constrained your time is. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and to answer all of our questions and to go down the rabbit holes with me.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thank you everybody who is out there watching this episode of Podcast Live, and especially Mary for jumping in on this new venture and saying like, okay, we're gonna do this live, and she was like, oh, okay. So I really appreciate your trusting me, Mary, with this and for coming on. It was fabulous, and I really enjoyed talking with you. And for those of you out there listening, the question I get most often is, will this be recorded? Do we get to listen to this later? And the answer is yes, of course. So this will be available as a podcast on savvypainter.com, and then we have this video in our community. Mary, thank you so much one more time, and that is it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Have a good day, Andrea. Or good evening now.